She sprinted toward the Talon, where she could just make out Arador's form in front of its black and silver hull. She quickened her pace, wincing as a stitch knifed through her side. He was making his way toward the line of merrics, along with 5 soldiers. Was this all that was left? The king mounted his merrick, as did his surviving men. Off to the side, Sen and Maeve did the same. Where was Agador? "Sire!" she tried to call, but her voice chose that moment to abandon her. "Vaxi, come on!" Sen shouted. "Phage has fallen! We need to leave!" Every footfall, every yard drove a needle of pain into her side. The wound where she had been pierced by a Vanden arrow, which she had thought had been healed, had returned to aggravate her at the worst possible moment. She ran on, throwing a glance to her right. The Vandans had broken through the barrier of fire and were advancing. A line of 30 more bowmen continued to fire, but they had no defense against the Vandan archers. In the space of seconds, 2 of them fell dead. Vaxi ran the last 20 yards, slamming to a halt against a riderless merrick. She gasped for breath, trying to lift her foot into the stirrup. Every muscle in her body complained as she slid her boot in and hauled herself into the saddle. Once atop the merrick, she knocked another arrow and fired, downing another Vandan in his tracks. "Retreat!" she screamed as 3 more bowmen fell, hoping they would take the cue. To the north, King Arador was galloping toward the northern entrance, along with 5 soldiers. Maeve and Sen lagged behind, casting expectant looks her way. Vaxi fired 2 more arrows and kicked her mount's flanks. The beast sped up the road. She kept her head down, following right behind Maeve and Sen as they charged past the final outbuildings and up the hill toward the 2 trees canopying the road to Dar. Tears pricked at her eyes as more men screamed and died behind her. She wanted to look back to see if any of the bowmen were following, but she dared not. She kicked her merrick's sides and increased its speed as it charged up the hill and through the canopy. To her left, Maeve had dismounted and was jamming something into a hollow depression in the larger of the 2 trees draped over the path. She risked a glance behind them. Where the path met the town, a dozen mounted Vandans thundered toward them, their faces twisted in anger and blackened with smoke. They had maybe a 20-second lead. "Maeve!" Vaxi screamed. "Charge Sit!" Maeve threw herself back into her merrick's saddle, spurring it into motion like she had been riding the beasts her whole life. Vaxi rode alongside her, head down. Sen was 50 yards ahead of them, and Arador and his men were 10 yards beyond Sen. All of them seemed to have stopped. The hoofbeats behind them increased in volume. "Sen, your highness!" Vaxi called. Sen looked back, a pleading look on his face. What on Elystra was going? Boom! A deafening whoosh and a blast of heat slammed into Vaxi's back. She gritted her teeth against the pain, but her merrick, seemingly unaffected, rode on. The explosion gave way to a splintering, cracking sound. Vaxi glanced back again, just in time to see the mighty tree, with half of its branches already ablaze, topple over. It hit the ground with a tremendous crash, sending billows of smoke and flames into the air. She mouthed a short prayer. Not one of their Vandan pursuers had made it through. Nor had any of the king's bowmen.